Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. I'm your host, Jamie Lima, and founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions, where we help people better prepare for, navigate, and recover financially from divorce. This podcast is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. In today's episode, we're joined by Jonathan Breeden of Breeden Law, a seasoned attorney specializing in family law. Jonathan's experience in navigating the complexities of divorce, child custody, and related financial negotiations helps his clients manage this challenging transition with confidence and clarity. One of the things that he wants to focus on in our conversation today, and I thought it was a great topic for us, is really trying to divorce without drama and how to make the process as painless as possible through the entire process. So we're going to focus on minimizing financial stress with proactive planning, avoiding costly legal mistakes, and reducing conflict to save money, which is near and dear to my heart as someone who paid $75,000, Jonathan, on my divorce. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you financially and personally empowered. Jonathan, it's so great to have you with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jamie. I've been looking forward to this. I've listened to several episodes of your podcast, and I think you're doing a tremendous community service out there because, divorce is not the end. It may be the end of the relationship, but it's not the end of your life. And you gotta move forward, and you gotta be taking positive steps to move forward. And I think you help people see that by sharing your own experiences. And I think it's great that this is out there as a resource for people going through divorce.
Well, I certainly appreciate the kind words, especially coming from somebody who's been doing this work for 25 years. What prompted you to get into family law? It's such an emotional situation.
It kind of happened by accident, Jamie. My name is Jonathan Breeden. I'm a divorce attorney in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. I do have an office in Raleigh and then in Johnson County, Harnett County, and Raleigh is in Wake County. So in the surrounding area, I have 4 offices there, all right around Raleigh, which is a very fast growing area. One of the fastest growing areas in the country, as it's been ranked Raleigh's been ranked the number 1 place to live in America so many times I can't even count. And I ended up doing family law almost by accident. I graduated from law school in 2000 from Campbell University's Adrian Wiggins School of Law, and I came here to the suburbs of Raleigh with the intent to do criminal defense and maybe some small business law. And I started out, I really didn't know anybody. I just knew it was a fast growing area. And I started doing court appointed work and representing parents whose children have been placed in foster care and representing parents who couldn't pay their child support. And I started doing criminal defense, just anything the court would give me to represent indigent people. And what was showing up to actually pay me were young families going through divorce and real estate closings. And I didn't want to get into real estate closings because I did have a professor in law school say a real estate closing is a HUD form's 108 ways to get sued. And it just seemed boring to me. And so I was like, you know what? I like the advocacy. I like being in court. And so these young families were coming here and I really wanted to eat. So I was like, sure, I'll take a custody case. I'll take a divorce case. And I found that I really enjoyed it. I'd taken family law in law school. I knew it was on the bar. I knew it was something that I may end up having to do, sort of being when I started out a jack of all trades type thing, small town lawyer, old school type stuff. And, after about 7-8 years of doing a little bit of everything, I decided to focus just on family law because that seemed to be what could pay more than court appointed work. I wasn't getting a ton of retained criminal work because in the suburbs, there are not a lot of criminals and we didn't have a busing system out here in the suburbs like you would have in the city. So the criminals couldn't get to me. And so I just started doing more and more family law. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. The more I found my passion for helping children was really the thing. And we were getting, and I still to this day, get kids out of really bad situations to good situations. And, you can do a lot of things with the God-given talent and brain power that I was given, but helping a child is about as good a thing as you can do. And once you start helping children, it's kind of hard to stop.
Well, and that just leads into my first question. I mean, we didn't prepare this, did we? And you're segueing perfectly into my first question, which is around child support and custody negotiations, right? So we see this happen. We see this a lot on the financial side, right? Where people are trying to figure out who's going to, what does the visitation schedule look like? Because we'll help with parenting plans and sorting all that out. We'll help with the child support calculations and supporting the attorney in that regard. But when it comes to approaching negotiations regarding the financial obligations like child support and alimony, I hate to ask this question this way, but how are you ensuring that people get the most fair outcome? Because alimony in general is very arbitrary in most states. There's very few calculators out, very few states that actually have a calculator related to alimony, and child support is pretty straightforward. So, like, how are you helping people walk away and make sure those kids are taken care of in maximizing that support? Is there anything you can share with us there?
I mean, I think you're right. Because there are no alimony calculators in almost every single state, there might be 2 states that have them. It really is a crapshoot as to what is going to happen, as far as whether, in order to get alimony, you have to have a supporting spouse, which means you have to have a spouse who makes enough money that after they pay their reasonable bills and their child support, they have money left over to pay to the dependent spouse. And to have a dependent spouse, you have to have a spouse that after they earn whatever they earn and they receive their child support, they can't pay their reasonable bills. And, the definition of a reasonable bill is basically the judge hearing it. And every judge is going to look at it differently, because that comes down to how judges value money, which often goes down to the background of how the judges were raised. I mean, it really doesn't have anything to do with the law, because they can kind of do whatever they want when it comes to alimony. Child support, there are calculators in every state, but you start getting into a self-employed case, and a child support case can be as complicated as an alimony case, because then you got to figure out what are the spouse's incomes to be divided, or the parents' incomes. I shouldn't say spouses. A lot of kids are born outside of wedlock now. So, and that number goes up every year. Every year, the percentage of children born out of wedlock seems to go up. So, I mean, what we try to do is be realistic and honest with people. You know what I mean? And if we don't know the answer, we try to tell them we don't know the answer, but we can give them some broad things as to where we think it's going to line up. We can run a child support calculator and get a general idea. If we can get a general idea of what the income of the parties are, what the daycare costs are, what the health insurance costs are, and kind of what the custodial schedule is going to be. That has a lot of effect on child support. Alimony, I mean, you just never know. You never know what a judge is going to find a reasonable bill or not a bill. But the one thing I would tell people about alimony is, and the mistake I see a lot of people make is, if you and I were married, Jamie, and our combined net income was $7,000, and we were probably living paycheck to paycheck like 54% of all Americans or whatever, don't fill out a financial affidavit saying your reasonable needs are $9,000 when together we only made $7,000. I mean, you know what I mean? How are your reasonable needs now $9,000 when we were together? We only had $7,000, Jamie. But now you need $9,000 from the other side. Like, that kind of stuff, can really kind of mess things up. But I mean, I think you just got to be realistic. But the one thing I've seen in my 25 years is alimony is becoming less frequent, lower amounts, and for less time. And I think that, at least in North Carolina, and this may be what's happening around the country, I do think that a lot of that is as a result of the fact that it's often been paid to women. Now, I do have women who pay men alimony. I have clients where that happens. But I do think what has happened now is, particularly in places like Raleigh, where the unemployment rate is basically zero, people can get back in the workforce fairly quickly if they want to. And, we have this great community college system here in North Carolina. There's a great community college system around the country. I was on the board of a local community college. I used to go to national community college conferences. I was always impressed by the community college presidents and board members I met from around the country. So women or the dependent spouse are now able to quickly get retrained and quickly get an education and get back into this workforce, at least in areas like Raleigh and Charlotte and Greensboro around North Carolina, where the unemployment rate really is, if it could be negative, it probably would be negative when you take out the people who are not actually looking for work but are on the board. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's happening is there's so many opportunities, particularly in these areas that are growing fast, that judges are less likely to give it for longer. The other thing is the sheer cost of living has gone up so much and the child support numbers have gone up so much, a lot of what you would have thought was a supporting spouse no longer has any money left over by the time they pay their child support.
Do you think these changes with the alimony in particular are a function of the overall economic climate, or do you think it's just a function of times are changing and it's now time for you to get, these courts are recognizing that, lifetime alimony and it's time for some of them, whoever is receiving alimony to recognize that this is a bridge and this is not something that's going to be, live on in perpetuity?
Right. I do think the judges now see it as a bridge. You know what I mean? And I think they recognize that these spouses have tons of opportunities to re-educate themselves and get back in the workforce if they so choose. And so it used to be used as a punishment. You know what I mean? If somebody had an affair, you want to get them, that kind of stuff. But now, and North Carolina still has 15 things, I think, that alimony can be based on. But the thing that I think alimony, the number one thing alimony is based on now, which may not have always been the case, is how it's going to be a bridge and how can we help this dependent spouse get back in this workforce and be able to support themselves. And that's why you see it for a lot less time than you used to when I first started. It really is now being seen as a way to allow the dependent spouse to go get an education, to get some job skills, and then get back in this workforce and take care of themselves way more than it used to be.
Got it. And I know you're in North Carolina and you have a ton of experience there. We do cases in all 50 states. I think so far we've had 27 or 28 states that we've done work in. And I will tell you, just across the board, I'm seeing the same thing happen in other states too. Even here in California, it used to be a very liberal state here in California, still is. If you look at the most recent election, the state of California is just very, very liberal when it comes to a lot of things. But even alimony, the window is shrinking. So one of the things that we do, which I'm sure you've heard of and probably do some semblance of yourself in your own practice, we'll create what we call a lifestyle analysis, which is basically, a book report on, the person who's arguing for alimony and additional support. Like this is your honor. This is what this person sacrificed in their career earnings. And this is what they did to support the household and their soon to be ex-spouse's career and advancement there and so on. And this is what they need as far as alimony goes. If we're talking about alimony in particular, this is what they're asking for. And this is why they're asking for it. But this is the plan of attack moving forward. Like, we're going to go to school and we're going to finish up our degree and we're going to get the certification, or we just need enough time to get little Johnny and little Susie out of high school and then she's going to be able to work full time, whatever it is, right? And so we draft that document, and that's proved to be helpful in a lot of ways. Everybody calls, it's something different. We call it a lifestyle analysis, but that's what we've used, and it seems to be helpful. But back to your point, I mean, it's this shrinking window. So we've got to try to, with the clients that we do work with, have to recognize that. And if you're listening to this, listeners, and you're going to be the one asking for alimony, you have to recognize that it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. It's not impossible, but you need to make sure you have all your ducks in a row.
I agree. And the other thing is, you still, if you're heavily relying on alimony to pay your bills, that person still has to pay it. Right? Like, I think there is a power in earning your own money and paying your own bills, because not everybody I don't care what the court orders, not everybody pays their child support. Not everybody pays their alimony. And so I think that that's important. I do think that if you're able to get back in the workforce, and particularly if you've not been working or whatever, it's empowering. It's a confidence builder. All those types of things I think are really important. And, but the concept of getting 15, 20-year alimony awards, that's just not happening now.
No. One of the things you brought up just a second ago, you in the last couple of minutes of our conversation, I have like 10 other questions that I wasn't planning on asking you, but you brought up some amazing points here. One of them, to rewind the tape a little bit, was related to businesses. We work with a lot of cases where there's businesses involved. Some are very small businesses. Some are very large businesses, and some they don't really know how big the business is because they're not paying any attention to it. I'll just say this. We represent like 95% of the clients that we represent are women who a lot of them have been stay-at-home moms and they've let the husband run the business and do their own thing. One particular case that we're working on right now had no clue how much revenue was coming in until we saw the profit and loss statement. And it was a $7 million business, $7 million a year. So I'm sure you see this all the time relative to support and maybe even going as far as like, dividing up that asset through by way of the divorce. Like, how are you handling that? So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I have we have this small business, it's only generating $7 million a year in revenue. Like, you must be asking 1,000 questions.
Yeah, I mean, $7 million is a lot of money if it's creating that kind of revenue. But I tell you what, I've seen a lot of $7 million businesses that are not profitable. And that's a whole nother debate. And you have too, you know what I mean? So, it really is not always just the gross number. Is this business actually making money? And if it is, what is, particularly in the divorce situation, what is the total owner benefit? What is the owner of this business being able to get out, whether it be their W-2 wage, whether it be the bonuses they can pay themselves every month, whether they're paying their health insurance, life insurance, what are they running through the business that is legally deductible, and what are they running through the business that might be a little questionable if they got audited, but they're still running it through the business. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. So, that does important. I do think it's important to get business evaluators involved if you're dealing with any business of that size to see kind of what the business may actually be worth and start just sort of looking under the hood to see, is this business making money? Because just because it's doing $7 million does not mean it's actually a profitable business.
Yeah. In this particular case, luckily it was. And we went through the profit and loss statement and we actually found $1 million in draws that the soon-to-be ex-spouse was taking that the wife didn't even know about. So now we've got to go through the whole asset tracing and figure out where that money went and how was it spent. And because there was, there's some infidelity involved, unfortunately. So we're like, okay, now did that money go to, trips with the girlfriend or whatever? Who knows? But we're at the kind of first or second inning in this one as far as where we are in the process. But we see stuff like this happen all the time. We found there's another case where we had a financial advisor involved. So he thought he was going to be able to pull one over on me, but little did he know that I've been doing this work for 20 years and run my own financial planning practice as well. So I'm well aware of the costs that are associated with it. And we found an HSA account that no one knew existed that had almost $600,000 in it. And we also found he was running the kids' orthodontics and expenses like that through the business just to make himself look poorer on paper.
Yeah, no, that happens all the time. Yeah, it's that does happen, and so you got to go back through, and that's where having a professional business evaluator go through and look at it and help you peel some of that back. Same thing if you're in an alimony case against somebody who's owns their own business, and what they say their income is and what their income actually is never the same, and you got to go through and see what are they paying personally, what personal expenses are running through that business to knock down the profit and loss on that business. But the main thing is, for all the listeners out there, if you're thinking about going through a divorce, you're early in the process, you need a budget. The first thing you need to do is you need to make a budget as to for you to stay where you are, and if you're leaving, where are you going? What is the mortgage? I'm going to tell you what, just because your spouse leaves, the only bill that changes is food. The power bill stays the same. The water bill's the same. The trash, the mowing the yard, the mortgage, the taxes. So you can get a pretty good idea of what your budget's going to be or what you would need if you stay. And then you need to look at what your budget would be if you go. What would it cost to rent a place, or, and what would the power be at that place, and the water and the taxes and the garbage and all of that stuff, because you've got to have a realistic idea as to what your budget is where you're staying and what your budget is where you're going. It costs more than 60% more to live apart than together, and most Americans are living check to check. Well, 60% more money is not just going to appear, so everybody's lifestyle is going to have to change. And that is one of the biggest things I run into is they come in here and say, well, my lifestyle's not going to change. I'm like, oh, it's going to change, because y'all were living check to check like most Americans. And now we need 60% more money into this unit that's now separating because there's two rents, two power bills, two water bills, two trash bills. The cell phone plan gets split, so you lose some of the discounts there. The car insurance gets split, you lose some of the multi-car discounts there. And all of this stuff starts to add up. And you don't just get to live the way you were living because your marriage fell apart. I don't care whose fault it is. I don't care if he cheated or he didn't cheat or whatever. What I'm saying is, you got to be prepared and you got to be realistic. And the longer you're not prepared and you're lying to yourself, the more painful this is going to be and the harder it's going to be to get settled.
I am as passionate about this as you are. I can feel it. I can feel it coming through the camera, how passionate you are about that. And I love it because I talk about this all the time. And it's such a rudimentary exercise, right, that we take people through. And it's one of the very first things we'll do with all of our clients. The divorce financial planning work that we do is, even though it's much more complex in many respects, and it's very, very nuanced, the process is the same that we take everyone through, just like we would through a traditional financial planning engagement. If you were coming to me, Jonathan, you're like, hey, I want to think about retiring in the next few years and what that's going to look like and everything else, we would take you through a very similar exercise, which is the first thing. What are your goals and objectives? What do you want your life to look like after this is finally over? If you're going to, what do you want retirement to look like? It's the very same conversation on the other side. What do you want your newfound single life to look like? Are you going to be able to stay in the same neighborhood, keep the kids in the same schools? Like, do you want to try to keep the house, and try to figure all those things out? And then once we get an understanding of where they're headed or where they want to head, then we can figure out, do we have the gas in the tank to be able to help them get there? Right. And to your point, it's all about, a lot of it stems on the budget. And there's so many people we work with that it's the question of, do I keep the house? Do I not keep the house? And many times it's like, listen, I appreciate the emotional aspects of this and the psychological aspects of being able to keep the kids in the same schools, in the same neighborhood and everything else, but it just doesn't work because of exactly what you're talking about. So if you're listening to this and you're going through this exercise, you can go to our website. There's a list of free resources that are available. One of them is an income and expense worksheet. Just spend some time with this and look at the numbers and figure out where you stand.
You're absolutely right. And one of the number one mistakes I've seen, particularly the dependent spouses make, is in most divorces, the equity that is in the home is the largest single asset, particularly in areas like Raleigh that have a housing shortage. We see houses go up exponentially just because, and passive increases because they sit in Raleigh and there's not enough houses and so many people want to live in Raleigh. And so, but you can't take the equity in that house to the grocery store. You cannot take the equity in that house and go pay a medical bill or get a prescription. You cannot take the equity in that house and go on a vacation to Disney World or Disneyland or wherever you want to go. And so particularly women get held up in the emotional thing of the house when if they would leave the house, they would be handed $150,000 or $200,000 in cash for their equity in the house. And that would be a nice nest egg to get started on their new life. But if they stay in the house, they may not get a distributive award at all. And their equity, their cut of it is in the house. And that doesn't actually do them any good as far as paying their bills. But it's because it's in the house. And so I'm always telling people that the equity in that house doesn't pay your bills. It is a place to live, and you might often be better off moving out of it. I told somebody that yesterday. I don't think they're going to listen, but I was like, you'd be better off moving somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. And get that fresh. Sometimes it's all about that fresh start. And like you said, getting an understanding of your financial situation, putting your future financial plan in place and all those things. And then you have this momentum and life isn't so scary. I've seen that play out, dozens of times. One of the things that we always talk about, and so kind of just shifting gears and thinking about post-divorce, right? The divorce is now, finalized. Any thoughts on steps people can take, once the divorce is finalized, what are you telling people to do? Is there, one of the things I think about all the time is estate planning, right? People miss this estate planning. They don't have their will or trust. They don't have any of those important things in place. So if I were your client and, now the divorce is, we just walked out of the courthouse and it's now behind me, what would you say to me?
I think you're right. I think you should, if you don't have a will, you should make a will. And if you don't have the sort of living documents, a durable power of attorney, a living will, maybe a general power of attorney, depending on your situation, a healthcare power of attorney, those things you probably need to go ahead and make those documents because it's not going, you don't have a spouse anymore, you're divorced. And so it's not going to kind of default to that person. The other thing is go check your beneficiaries on your life insurance, because that doesn't change just because you got divorced. If I had $1 for every person that called me that said my husband just died and the life insurance is going to his ex-wife from 20 years ago, what can I do? And the answer is nothing, because he could have changed the beneficiary. I can almost retire. That is one of the worst calls to get, Jamie. And I get at least 1 or 2 a year. And it's painful because they just forgot. Or maybe they didn't forget. I don't know, but they're dead and we can't ask them. So review your life insurance. Also your stock accounts, your 401ks, your IRAs, that stuff is outside the will too. They have their own payable on death things. They have their own survivors. So if you're with Edward Jones or Scottrade or Allegiant Divorce or whoever, go and check and make sure you know who the beneficiaries are of your stuff, because oftentimes you set up as your spouse, if you don't change it and you die, your spouse still gets it. The divorce doesn't change the beneficiaries.
I as you're walking us through this, I'm thinking still about one case that has haunted me to this day. I said multiple times to this dude, you need to change the beneficiaries on this particular account. And there were accounts that didn't have beneficiaries. This was when, a different company that I was working for. This was before I launched my own company 5 years ago, working for a big name firm. Probably told this guy 10 times, like, listen, this is a problem. And he wasn't young by any stretch of the imagination. And sure enough, it took 3 years for us to unwind that. 3 freaking years.
Yeah. And I got stories. You got stories, Jamie. Some people want the other spouse to have it and they don't make the change, but most people just forget. And it is a very painful conversation to have with somebody when the person is dead. I'm sure they probably wanted the new spouse to have it. They forgot about it. They didn't do it. They didn't review it. And now that other spouse has got the money. And so now, and they're not mourning the loss. They've been divorced 20 years, good riddance to the guy, but yet, the surviving spouse, is not getting what they should have gotten.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you're listening to this and you've been skirting this conversation and skirting this task, so to speak, it's a very easy, it's so easy to fix. How you can log onto your brokerage account website, the Fidelities of the world, the Schwabs of the world, all those, you can log in and do it in 5 minutes. And people just ignore this stuff. So we could do a whole show on estate planning.
Absolutely. But, these are all things that is part of the thing. But the one thing, before we get off of here, I want people to understand that are listening. The number one thing is you have to make decisions to be better. You have to make decisions that's going to move you forward. You cannot get in this paralysis analysis and your anxiety takes over and you're worried about 95% of stuff that's never going to happen. You need to take steps every day to better yourself and be self-sufficient and take care of yourself so that you can move forward without this other person, because they're gone. For whatever reason, they're gone. They're not coming back to help you. You're an adult. You got to take care of yourself. And the only way to do it is to make a decision. And not making a decision is a decision. And you need to be making positive decisions to move forward. Try something. If it doesn't work, you'll change it before all the bad things you're telling yourself happens. But if you don't start making decisions to be better, you won't do it. And you're going to wallow in self-pity. And that accomplishes nothing, because being a victim does nothing for you.
If I could drop this mic on your behalf, and it wasn't screwed into this thing, I would drop it. That was awesome, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it's evident that you're passionate about this stuff. It's evident that you however you fell into this line of work, you fell into the right one.
Well, thank you. No, look, I just want to see people be their best, right? Like, I want people to be the hero of their life story. I want them to take back their power. So many people have lost it through this abuse, a lot of abusive spouses, men and women out there. You know what I mean? They can take back their power and because they got a whole life to live. And so many people never start living their life again because they're living in the past. We can't do anything about the past, Jamie. We got to move forward. Society talks about everybody's a victim and identity this and identity that. No, that doesn't matter. You've got to take care of yourself and make decisions to be better. Get an education, read books, find a counselor. Better Health is great. They got counselors everywhere. You talk to them on the phone. It's like $250 a month, $300 a month. It's real cheap. Like there's all kinds of great stuff out there and resources that you can help yourself. There's podcasts like this one. Like you just got to start moving forward, and you just can't stay in one place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is what I would call the carte blanche segment of our show. Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't, or anything else you want to share? I mean, the last 5 minutes have been like so empowering, but anything I should have asked that I didn't ask?
No, I mean, I talk about the things that people should do. We didn't get into, we run out of time. We might should do 2 or 3 episodes, but one of the things that people do is, recognize that your kids are half the other side, and fighting over and trying to keep the other side from having a relationship with those kids is going to probably blow up in your face when it's all said and done. Because at some point they're going to be adults and they're going to have reasoning, and they're going to look back and say, you actively tried to keep me away from the other parent, and they're going to resent it. And they may not speak to you. And the one good thing about being at the same intersection in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina for 25 years, I've watched the kids grow up. They now have kids. Their kids play with my kids. And I know where the kids came from. And it's not a coincidence that I go to the softball game and a person who's grown up and has a child who's playing with my child, and the opposing party that tried to keep the little woman who's now a woman with a child away from the dad is not there, because the grown woman hasn't spoke to her mom in 10 years because she found out how she tried to keep her from the dad. I mean, that happens all the time. Like, and even if your child isn't seeing that parent right now, maybe that parent is choosing not to be involved. Maybe they're incarcerated. Your child is thinking about that parent every single day. And they don't hate the parent like you do. And you bad-mouthing that other parent is just stabbing that child in the heart, because that child is half the other parents.
Parental alienation is a real thing, man.
It is. Real thing. It is. And it's awful.
I dealt with it in my own case.
It's awful. And it always blows back up in the face of the parent doing the alienating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, your lips to God's ears on that one. But thanks so much, Jonathan, for coming on board today and sharing your expertise and insights into family law and so many financial planning aspects, right? Like there's very few attorneys that we've had on here that understand the financial aspects of the work that we do and the financial aspects of divorce like you do. I'm super thrilled that you were able to join us here and impart some of your wisdom. For those of you that are looking for more information or to consult with Jonathan, please visit his website at breedenlaw.com. And if you're facing the complexities of divorce and need specialized financial guidance, remember that Allegiant Divorce Solutions is here to assist. You can visit us at allegiantds.com for more resources. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more insightful discussions on navigating life's challenges. Until next time.